What happens when 4 events in 8 days accidentally reveal the entire blueprint for ending dollar dominance? December 9th through 17th, 2025. 8 days that Washington hoped you won't notice. Here is what Washington watched happen and couldn't stop. Ethiopia launches payment rails that bypass SWIFT. Indonesia negotiates trade outside dollar clearing. India takes control of BRICS with a digital weapons arsenal. And Modi flies to Addis Ababa to hardwire African payment systems into the anti-dollar network. This wasn't diplomacy. This was financial warfare. The dollar defenders will tell you this is impossible, that BRICS can't challenge the reserve currency status. Those alternatives are decades away. But I have been tracking de-dollarization infrastructure through sources in central banks and finance ministries across 3 continents. What happened in mid-December wasn't theory, it was a deployment. Subscribe now because the financial architecture of the next 50 years was built in those 8 days, and Western media is still pretending it didn't happen. I'm your BRICS navigator, and this channel exists because the mainstream narrative on BRICS is either dismissive or deliberately incomplete. Today we are breaking down a remarkably coordinated week for BRICS. Here is our agenda. First, Ethiopia's national digital payment strategy launch on December 9th and why this system is specifically designed to eliminate dollar dependency in African trade. Second, Indonesia's Moscow meeting on December 10th, where Prabowo Subianto and Putin discussed mechanisms to trade outside Western currency controls. Third, India's takeover of BRICS chairmanship in Brasilia on December 12th, inheriting the explicit mandate to build alternative payments infrastructure. And fourth, the smoking gun, Modi's Ethiopia visit on December 16th, where India committed to exporting the technology that processes billions of transactions without touching the dollar system. Let's start with the foundation, Ethiopia's Declaration of Payment Independence. December 9th, 2025, Addis Ababa, the second Ethiopian Digital Payment Conference. Ethiopia launches its National Digital Payment Strategy 2026 to 2030 and unveils the instant payment system. The Western financial press buried it on page 47. They should have put it on the front page because this is what de-dollarization infrastructure actually looks like. Here is what Ethiopia built: a national instant payment system operated by ETH-Switch that enables person-to-person transfers, bulk disbursements, and, here is the critical part, cross-border transactions in local currencies. Ethiopia's strategy document explicitly states the medium-term goal for 2027-2029. Integrate BRICS payment systems and negotiate currency swap agreements. Let me translate that for you. Currency swaps mean Ethiopia and India can trade in rupees and birr. Ethiopia and Russia can trade in rubles and birr. No dollar conversion, no SWIFT messaging, no New York clearing banks taking their cut. But you need the technical infrastructure first. You need the digital rails. Ethiopia just built them. Mobile money accounts in Ethiopia went from 12 million in 2020 to 139.5 million in 2025. The digital economy now processes 18.5 trillion birr annually. That's not a pilot program, but a real operational payment system with 140 million users ready to bypass dollar infrastructure entirely. Now, here is the strategic context that explains the urgency. Ethiopia entered a severe debt crisis and defaulted on its Eurobond in 2023. External debt hit $28.9 billion. Foreign exchange reserves dropped to $1.4 billion US, less than 1 month of import cover. The traditional playbook. Ethiopia went to the G20 Common Framework for Debt Restructuring. In mid-2024, the IMF approved a 4-year extended credit facility worth $3.4 billion US tied to fiscal and monetary reforms. So yes, Ethiopia is still working with the IMF and World Bank right now. But here is what Western analysts miss. Ethiopia is simultaneously building the infrastructure to reduce that dependence long term. Join BRICS, build domestic payment systems, position for new development bank financing, create the technical capacity for local currency trade. The instant payment system is about financial independence from dollar weaponization, and the timing tells you everything. 7 days after this system goes live, the Indian Prime Minister lands in Addis Ababa to integrate it into the BRICS infrastructure. December 10th, one day after Ethiopia's payment launch, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto meets Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin. The official readout talked about energy cooperation and defense ties. Read between the lines. Russia and Indonesia are discussing a free trade zone between Indonesia and the Eurasian Economic Union. Trade between them surged 17% in 9 months. Here is the question Western analysts refuse to ask. What currency are they using? Russia has been locked out of dollar clearing since the 2022 sanctions. Indonesia is a full BRICS member. Both nations have explicit de-dollarization mandates. They are not trading in dollars. They are using rubles, rupiah, yuan, and bilateral settlement mechanisms. Putin specifically thanked Indonesia for its BRICS membership during this meeting. That's not mere protocol, but recognition of Jakarta's part in shaping a parallel financial system. Indonesia contributes a population of 280 million, along with key sea passages in Southeast Asia. Meanwhile, Russia offers access to fuel suppliers as well as experience in bypassing international sanctions. Together, they are demonstrating that dollar-free trade isn't theoretical but operational. The Western financial establishment wants you to believe sanctions prove dollar dominance. The opposite is true. Sanctions accelerated de-dollarization by forcing sanctioned nations to build alternatives that now benefit everyone tired of dollar weaponization. Russia got cut off. Russia built workarounds. Now, those workarounds are available to any nation that wants to escape financial imperialism. Indonesia's meeting in Moscow wasn't about bilateral relations, but clearly about stress testing the bypass mechanisms before the network scales. Quick reality check before we move on. This analysis takes up time plus effort. Each step demands focus. We keep this channel going. No big companies funding us, no grants from institutions, none of that support tied to telling stories a certain way. If you care about insights like what you are listening today, please support us through the links below. Every bit helps keeping things running and free from the interests that want BRICS developments ignored or misrepresented. Let's back to the biggest news of the week. December 11th, 12th, Brazil. BRICS Sherpas meet. Brazil hands over chairmanship to India for 2026. The ceremony used a gavel made from Amazonian wood. Nice symbolism. But the real transfer was the agenda Brazil built and India will execute. Brazil's 2025 chairmanship delivered a framework declaration on climate finance, demanding reforms to multilateral development banks. Translation: end Western control of development financing through World Bank conditionality. Brazil pushed AI governance that promotes equitable access. Translation: break Silicon Valley's monopoly on advanced technology and prevent Western gatekeeping of AI development. Brazil focused on financial governance reform. Translation: challenge IMF dominance and build alternative lending mechanisms through the new development bank. Now India takes over with 4 pillars: resilience, innovation, cooperation, and sustainability. Let me decode what those pillars mean for the dollar. Resilience means insulating BRICS economies from dollar-based sanctions, payment cutoffs, and financial warfare. It means building redundant systems so Western financial exclusion has no teeth. Innovation means technology transfer that makes BRICS members less dependent on Western digital infrastructure. It means payment systems, data centers, and AI models developed outside Western control. Cooperation means integrating those systems. It means, for instance, Ethiopia's instant payment system talking to India's UPI, talking to Russia's SPFS, talking to China's CIPS. Sustainability means financing climate transition through NDB loans in local currencies instead of dollar-dominated debt from Bretton Woods institutions. India brings something specific to this fight: the world's most successful non-dollar payment infrastructure. India's unified payments interface processed over 100 billion transactions in 2024. India delivered $500 billion in welfare directly to bank accounts without correspondent banking. India proved you don't need dollars, you don't need SWIFT, and you don't need Western payment processors to run a modern economy. And now India is exporting that model to every BRICS nation that wants it. The 18th BRICS Summit in 2026 will be hosted by India. The agenda is already written: operationalize alternative payment infrastructure across all member states. December 16th, 17th, Modi lands in Addis Ababa. First Indian Prime Minister visit to Ethiopia in 15 years. The outcome: strategic partnership elevation, defense cooperation, technology transfer, and the critical piece: India commits to sharing digital public infrastructure expertise with Ethiopia. Specifically, India will help build Ethiopia's foreign ministry data center. India will advise on payment system interoperability. India will replicate the UPI model. Connect the dots. Ethiopia launches payment infrastructure on December 9th. Modi arrives December 16th, offering to integrate Indian technology. That's a 7-day turnaround. That's not reactive diplomacy, that's coordination. India and Ethiopia are now hardwiring their payment systems together. Ethiopia trades with China, Russia, United Arab Emirates, all BRICS members. India trades with all of them. Connect Ethiopia's IPS to India's UPI. Now African nations can settle trade with Asian nations in their own currencies. No dollar, no conversion fees, no Western intermediaries. India also backed Ethiopia's membership in the New Development Bank during this visit. The NDB currently holds a $40 billion portfolio across 122 projects. The NDB lends in local currencies. The NDB doesn't impose policy conditionality. That's the alternative to World Bank dollar hegemony: actual development financing without subordination. Modi's visit wasn't about bilateral relations. Instead, it aimed to link Ethiopia's financial system with BRICS payment platform. The technical setup is already in place. Thus, Ethiopia may conduct trade with India using birr alongside rupees. Meanwhile, Indonesia has the option to engage Russia via rupiah combined with rubles. Likewise, India can handle transaction with Russia through rupees together with rubles. The architecture is operational. The network is live. Every transaction that happens outside dollar clearing is a transaction the Federal Reserve doesn't see, Treasury can't freeze, and Western banks can't tax with conversion spreads. That's what the death of dollar hegemony looks like in practice. Not some dramatic announcement, just millions of transactions following through systems that don't touch New York. December from 9 to 17th, 2025 was a key week in which the dollar's dominance started to look less absolute because various BRICS nations tested real options instead. Although most media overlook this shift, Ethiopia built the rails, Indonesia proved the trade routes, India brought the technology, Modi connected the network. The dollar isn't dead, but it's no longer inevitable. Nations that produce, that build, that trade on mutual benefit, they don't need Washington's permission anymore. The financial imperialists wanted you to believe there is no alternative. BRICS just built one in 8 days. When did payment systems become weapons more powerful than aircraft carriers? Ask Ethiopia. They just found out. Subscribe, because the dollar's collapse won't be announced. It will be transacted. Thanks for watching.